You ever notice how the quietest person in the room is usually the one everyone's scared of? Not the loud one, not the one throwing their weight around, the one who just watches. I'm talking about that kid in the back of the class who never says a word, the one who keeps their head down, eyes on the desk, pretending they don't exist. You walk past them every day and don't think twice. They're just there. Background noise, a shadow, and that's exactly what they want you to think. See, most people out here in California, hell anywhere really, we're obsessed with the ones who make noise, the ones who demand attention, the influencers, the loudmouths, the show-offs. We're so busy watching them perform that we completely miss what's actually going down right under our noses. We miss the shift, the quiet moment when everything changes and nobody even realizes it yet. There's this thing that happens in spaces where power lives. Could be a classroom, could be a boardroom, could be anywhere someone thinks they run the show. You get this atmosphere, right? This thick, heavy air where everyone knows their place. The king sits at the top, untouchable. Everyone else? They play their part. They follow the script. They don't make waves because making waves gets you crushed. And then there's that one person who doesn't fit. They're not playing the game because nobody even knows they're in it. They blend into the walls. They're so unremarkable that people forget they can see, forget they can hear, forget they're even human sometimes. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? You've seen them. Maybe you've been them. That kid sitting 3 rows back with the worn-out hoodie and the scuffed-up shoes. The one who never raises their hand, never laughs too loud, never causes a scene. Teachers don't call on them. Other students don't invite them anywhere. They exist in this weird pocket of social invisibility where everyone just overlooks them, like they're furniture, like they're part of the architecture. But here's the thing nobody talks about. Fica conmigo at el final, because this is where it gets wild. Being invisible. That's the ultimate superpower. When people don't see you, when they think you don't matter, when they assume you're too weak or too scared or too insignificant to do anything, that's when you have all the power in the world. Because they stop being careful around you. They stop guarding their secrets. They say things they shouldn't say. They do things they shouldn't do. And you? You just sit there, watching, waiting, collecting pieces of a puzzle they don't even know you're putting together. There's this moment, and maybe you felt it before, where the temperature in a room just drops. Nothing obvious happens. No one says anything dramatic, but something shifts. Something invisible becomes visible for just a split second, and if you're paying attention, if you're really locked in, you catch it. That micro expression, that hesitation, that look, the look that says, wait, were you always there? So picture this. A space where power is assumed, where hierarchy is law, where someone sits at the center like they own the oxygen in the room. Everyone plays their role. Everyone stays in line. The ecosystem is balanced, predictable, safe. And somewhere in that space, somewhere you're not looking, there's someone who isn't playing by those rules. Not because they're brave. Not yet. But because they've learned something the rest of us forgot. Sometimes survival looks like surrender. Sometimes the smartest move is to become so small that predators forget your prey. Você já passou por isso? That moment when you realize the person everyone ignored was actually the most dangerous one in the room? Because what happens next? What always happens when invisibility meets power, when silence meets volume, when the overlooked finally gets seen? That's when everything you thought you understood gets flipped completely upside down. And look, if this already got under your skin, if you're feeling that slight discomfort creeping in, do me a solid real quick. Hit that like button. Seriously. Because stories like this, the ones about people nobody sees until it's too late, YouTube doesn't push these. The algorithm doesn't care about the invisible ones. But you do. And when you like this, when you subscribe, you're basically telling the platform, yeah, these stories matter. You're giving a voice to everyone who's ever been overlooked, dismissed, or underestimated. Plus, there's way more where this came from. Stories that'll make you rethink everything you thought you knew about power, silence, and what it really means to survive. So if you're vibing with this, lock in, subscribe. Become part of this thing we're building here. A space where the quiet ones finally get heard. Now back to what happens when that invisible kid finally makes their move. Now here's where things get interesting, and I mean really interesting. Because what we're actually talking about here isn't just about some kid in a classroom or some random person getting overlooked. We're talking about a fundamental truth about how power actually works in the real world. And spoiler alert, it's nothing like what they teach you. See, most people think power is loud. They think it's about being the biggest personality in the room, the one everyone's looking at, the one calling all the shots. And sure, that's one kind of power. That's the obvious kind. The kind that sits at the front of the class, leans back in their chair like they own the place, makes jokes that everyone laughs at even when they're not funny. That's surface-level dominance. That's the king on the throne, and everyone knows it. But there's another kind of power that operates completely differently. It's the power of observation, the power of patience, the power of knowing things other people don't even realize are worth knowing. And this is where our invisible person comes in, the one nobody's paying attention to, the one who's mastered the art of being so unremarkable that they might as well be a ghost. Think about it like this. When you're visible, when everyone knows who you are and what you're capable of, you have to perform. You have to maintain that image. You're constantly being watched, judged, tested. Every move you make is under scrutiny. You can't slip up because everyone's waiting for you to fail. That's exhausting, bro. That's a prison made of expectations and reputation. But when you're invisible, when nobody thinks you matter, you're free. You can move through spaces without anyone tracking you. You can listen to conversations you were never meant to hear. You can watch patterns emerge that everyone else is too busy performing to notice. You become this silent collector of information, this observer of human behavior at its rawest, most unfiltered level. Now, in this particular space we're talking about, this environment where hierarchy is everything, there's someone at the top who's gotten comfortable. Too comfortable. They've been running things their way for so long that they've stopped being careful. They've stopped watching their back because why would they? Everyone here knows the rules. Everyone here plays along. The system works. The power structure is solid. And then there's our ghost, our invisible one, sitting there day after day, blending into the background like wallpaper. They don't contribute to discussions. They don't volunteer answers. They don't try to climb any social ladders. They're just present. A warm body filling a seat. At least that's what everyone assumes. But what nobody sees, what they can't see because they're not looking, is what's happening behind those quiet eyes. There's this thing in psychology called observation without engagement. It's when you're in a space but you're not participating in it. You're studying it. You're learning the rhythms, the patterns, the unspoken rules. You're figuring out who really has power and who's just pretending. You're noticing the cracks in the facade that everyone else is too distracted to spot. And this person, they've been doing that for a while now. Long enough to understand the ecosystem completely. Long enough to know exactly how the person at the top operates. What makes them feel secure. What makes them feel threatened. What buttons could be pushed if someone knew where they were. Except nobody knows this quiet observer has been collecting all these pieces. Nobody suspects that invisibility was never weakness. It was strategy. Agora eu quero ir ainda mais profundo nesse assunto because here's where the real transformation starts happening. There comes a moment in every power dynamic where something shifts. Sometimes it's obvious. A confrontation, a challenge, a dramatic showdown. But the most dangerous shifts? Those happen quietly. Those happen in the spaces between words, in the pauses, in the looks that last just a second too long. Picture this. Another ordinary day in this space. The powerful one is doing their thing, completely in their element, totally secure in their position. Everyone's playing their assigned roles. The social machinery is humming along smoothly. And then something happens. Something small. So small that most people don't even catch it. Maybe it's a question that gets asked. Maybe it's a statement that lands differently than expected. Maybe it's just a moment where the invisible person does something, anything that breaks pattern. And the powerful one notices. Not obviously. Not with shock or alarm. Just this tiny flicker of awareness. This micro moment where their brain goes, wait, hold up. It's the kind of moment that passes in less than a second, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. Because what just happened is that the invisible person stopped being invisible. Not to everyone, just to the one person who matters. This is crucial, so stay with me here. The power dynamic hasn't actually changed yet. On the surface, everything looks exactly the same. The hierarchy is still intact. The roles are still defined. But underneath, there's been a shift in awareness. The powerful one now knows, even if they don't fully realize it yet, that they're being seen. Really seen. Not with admiration or fear or any of the usual responses they're used to, but with understanding, with clarity, with the kind of knowing that comes from months or years of silent observation. And that changes everything. Because power that goes unchallenged becomes sloppy. It becomes arrogant. It stops being careful about what it reveals, because it assumes nobody's watching carefully enough to connect the dots. But when you realize someone has been watching, when you understand that those quiet eyes have been recording every mistake, every moment of weakness, every secret you thought was hidden, that's when the real discomfort sets in. The thing is, this isn't about revenge. Not yet, anyway. This isn't even about conflict in the traditional sense. This is about something way more subtle and way more powerful. It's about the moment when someone realizes they've been underestimated. That the person they dismissed as insignificant actually saw everything, understood everything, and chose to stay silent. Until now. There's this concept in game theory about information asymmetry. When one player knows significantly more than the other player realizes. In business, in politics, in warfare, whoever has the information advantage usually wins. But we don't think about this in everyday social dynamics. We assume everyone's playing with roughly the same knowledge base. We assume the person at the top knows everything important, and the person at the bottom knows nothing valuable. But what if that assumption is dead wrong? What if the person at the bottom has been accumulating knowledge the entire time, building this comprehensive understanding of how everything really works, mapping out all the vulnerabilities in the system? And what if they've been doing it so quietly, so patiently, that nobody even considered them a player in the game? That's the position our invisible person is in right now. They've got something the powerful one doesn't even know exists, a complete picture. They understand the mechanics of this little world better than anyone, because they've had the luxury of watching without the burden of performing. They've seen the truth behind the performance. They know where the bodies are buried, metaphorically speaking. And in this moment, this small, almost imperceptible moment we're talking about, there's an exchange. Not of words, just of recognition. The powerful one's eyes land on the quiet one, and for just a fraction of a second, there's this question hanging in the air. How much do you actually know? The quiet one doesn't answer, doesn't need to. Just holds that gaze for a beat longer than expected. Long enough to confirm, yeah, I see you. I've always seen you. And maybe, just maybe, I see you more clearly than you see yourself. That's when the powerful one looks away first. It's such a small thing. Most people in the room wouldn't even notice it, but it happened. That tiny concession, that microscopic acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, the hierarchy isn't as solid as everyone thought. That maybe there's someone in this space who doesn't fear the throne because they understand something the person sitting on it doesn't. Thrones are only powerful when everyone agrees they are. And our invisible observer? They just learned something crucial. They learned that their silence has weight, that their attention has value, that being underestimated isn't a weakness. It's been the greatest advantage they could possibly have. Because while everyone else was busy watching the obvious show, they were learning the real game. The one that happens in whispers and glances, and the truths people only reveal when they think nobody important is listening. The transformation isn't complete yet. The story isn't over. But something fundamental has shifted. The invisible person isn't quite so invisible anymore. At least not to the one person who should have been watching them all along. Comenta aí. Eu já fui invisível assim. Porque I bet a lot of you know exactly what I'm talking about. So let's talk about what happens next, because this is where human psychology gets really fascinating. When someone who's always been in control suddenly realizes they might not have complete control anymore, their brain does this weird thing. It doesn't immediately fight back. It doesn't panic. Instead, it starts this internal calculation, this risk assessment, this quiet questioning of, okay, what exactly is the threat level here? And that's exactly what's happening with our powerful figure right now. They're not losing sleep over this yet. They're not changing their behavior in any obvious way, but there's this new awareness that wasn't there before. Like when you're walking through your house at night and you hear a sound you can't quite identify. You don't freak out immediately, but you're definitely more alert. You're listening harder. You're paying attention to things you normally wouldn't notice. The invisible observer has created doubt, not through any grand gesture or dramatic confrontation, just through existing in a way that finally registered as intentional rather than accidental. And doubt, man, doubt is like a virus in a power structure. Once it gets in, it spreads. It makes you question things you never questioned before. It makes you wonder what else you might have missed. Now here's where the human element gets really complex, and I think this is something we don't talk about enough in our culture. We love stories about heroes and villains, good guys and bad guys, clear moral lines. But real life, real human dynamics, they're messy as hell. Because the person at the top of this hierarchy, the one everyone sees as powerful, maybe even intimidating, they're not some cartoon villain. They're a human being who probably didn't set out to be oppressive or controlling. They just found themselves in a position of power and did what most people do in that situation. They got comfortable with it. That's the truth nobody wants to admit. Most people who have power don't see themselves as powerful. They see themselves as just doing their thing, maintaining order, making sure everything runs smoothly. They're not sitting there twirling their mustache thinking about how to dominate people. They're just existing within a system that gives them advantages, and over time those advantages start feeling like rights. Like the natural order of things, and the people below them, the quiet ones, the invisible ones, they become part of the scenery. Not through malice, but through habit. Through the simple human tendency to stop seeing things we encounter every day. You walk past the same tree every morning, you stop noticing it. Same principle. The powerful person didn't consciously decide to dehumanize the quiet observer. They just stopped seeing them as someone who mattered in their world. But now that's changing. And this is where the moral complexity kicks in hard. Because once you've been made aware that you've been overlooking someone, once you realize that your comfort came at the cost of someone else's invisibility, you're faced with a choice. And both options suck, honestly. You can acknowledge it, which means admitting you were wrong, that you were careless, that you contributed to someone feeling unseen and unheard. That's a massive hit to your ego and your self-image as a good person. Or you can double down. You can tell yourself they're overreacting, that they're trying to manipulate you, that you didn't actually do anything wrong because you never intended harm. Most people choose the second option. It's easier. It protects their sense of self, but it also requires them to actively ignore evidence that contradicts their narrative. And that creates this cognitive dissonance that eats at them in ways they don't fully understand. Our powerful figure is in that exact space right now. They're doing these mental gymnastics trying to maintain their worldview while this new information is challenging it. They're watching the quiet observer more carefully now, but they're telling themselves it's just because they're being thorough, being attentive, being a good leader or authority figure or whatever role they're playing. They're not admitting, not even to themselves, that they're actually a little bit worried about what this person knows. And the quiet observer? They can see all of this happening. They can read it in the body language, in the timing of glances, in the subtle shifts in how they're being treated. Nothing dramatic. No one else would even notice, but they notice. Because they've been trained through necessity to read the smallest signals, to understand the unspoken language of power dynamics. This is what survival looks like when you can't rely on traditional strength or social capital, or any of the usual tools people use to navigate hierarchical spaces. You develop different skills. You become fluent in silence. You learn to read rooms like other people read books. You understand that information is power and patience is strategy. And sometimes the most effective move is no move at all. Agora eu quero ir ainda mais profundo nesse assunto because what we're really witnessing here is a transformation in how both of these people see themselves and each other. The powerful one is starting to feel something they probably haven't felt in this space for a long time. Uncertainty. Not about their formal authority. They still have that. But about whether that authority is as absolute as they thought it was. Whether the compliance they've been getting is genuine or just strategic. Whether the silence they've been hearing is agreement or just patience. And that uncertainty? It's making them make mistakes. Small ones. Nothing obvious. But when you've been in a position of unchallenged power, you develop patterns, rhythms, ways of doing things that work because nobody questions them. But now, with that seed of doubt planted, those patterns are getting disrupted. The powerful one second-guesses themselves in ways they didn't before. They're more reactive, less confident in their instincts. They're trying to figure out what game is being played while still pretending that no game exists. Meanwhile, the quiet observer is experiencing a different kind of transformation. They're discovering that they have agency, that their perspective matters, that the story they've been telling themselves, that they're powerless, insignificant, better off staying small, might not be the whole truth. They're realizing that invisibility was never a sentence. It was a choice. Maybe not a conscious one at first, maybe something they fell into as a survival mechanism, but still a choice. And choices can be unmade. But here's the brutal part that nobody talks about in those feel-good transformation stories. Recognizing your own power when you've spent so long believing you don't have any is terrifying. Because with power comes responsibility. With visibility comes vulnerability. When you're invisible, you can't fail because nobody expects anything from you. Nobody's watching. Nobody's judging. You're safe in your insignificance. But the moment you step into your own power even slightly, you become exposed. You become accountable. You become someone who can be criticized, challenged, rejected. So our quiet observer is dealing with this internal conflict. Part of them wants to retreat back into safety, back into the comfortable anonymity of being overlooked. But another part, a part that's been growing stronger with each passing day, with each new piece of information they've collected, with each moment of being underestimated, that part knows there's no going back. The genie's out of the bottle. The awareness has been created. Trying to become invisible again would be like trying to unhear something. Once you know you matter, you can't unknow it. And this creates this incredible tension in the space between these two people. Neither of them has made a dramatic move yet. To everyone else, nothing has changed. The social order appears intact. The hierarchy seems stable. But underneath, there's this silent war of perception happening. The powerful one trying to maintain control without appearing to need to maintain control. The quiet one trying to figure out what to do with this newfound awareness without drawing so much attention that they become a target. It's like watching two chess players who haven't moved any pieces yet, but are already 3 moves ahead in their minds. Calculating possibilities, weighing consequences, trying to anticipate what the other person knows and what they're planning. Except the stakes aren't a game. The stakes are dignity, safety, self-respect, and the very real question of who gets to define reality in this space. There's this moment, and I want you to really visualize this because it's crucial, where the powerful one does something they haven't done before. They ask a question. Not a rhetorical question, not a command disguised as a question, but an actual question directed at the quiet observer. Something that requires a real answer. Something that acknowledges, however subtly, that this person's input might actually have value. To everyone else in the space, it's nothing. Just another moment in another ordinary day. But to these two people, it's everything. Because what just happened is that the powerful one blinked first. They broke the unspoken rule that the quiet one doesn't need to be consulted, doesn't need to be engaged with, doesn't need to exist as anything more than a presence in the room. And the quiet one? They have to make a choice right there in real time. Do they give the safe answer, the expected answer, the one that maintains the status quo? Or do they give an answer that reveals they've been thinking, observing, understanding this whole time? Do they stay in character as the invisible nobody? Or do they show their hand? The answer they give isn't what matters most, though. What matters is the pause before they answer. That fraction of a second where everyone in the room can sense that something's different. Where the power dynamic is visibly negotiating itself in real time. Where the quiet one holds the attention of the powerful one and doesn't immediately collapse under it. That pause is everything. It's the moment where possibility opens up. Where the script everyone's been following starts to feel less like inevitable truth and more like just one option among many. Where the audience, because everyone else in the space is essentially an audience to this dynamic, starts to wonder what they've been missing. Deixa nos comentários. Eu já senti essa tensão no ar. Because something tells me you know exactly what this feeling is like, when everything changes but nothing has actually happened yet. The thing about power dynamics is that once they start shifting, they don't shift smoothly. It's not this gradual, predictable slide from one state to another. It's more like ice cracking on a frozen lake. You hear these little sounds, these tiny fractures forming, and for a while nothing visible changes. The surface still looks solid. People are still walking around like everything's fine. But underneath, the structural integrity is compromising itself in ways that can't be reversed. That's what's happening now in this space. The surface still looks normal. The hierarchy still appears intact. But those microfractures are spreading, and the people involved, they can feel it, even if they can't quite articulate what they're feeling. The powerful one is starting to do something they haven't done before. They're watching. Not in the performative way they used to watch, where it was all about demonstrating their authority and keeping everyone in line. This is different. This is surveillance driven by insecurity. They're tracking the quiet observer's movements, their reactions, trying to decode what's happening behind those carefully neutral expressions. And the wild part? The more they watch, the more they realize they don't actually know this person at all. For months, maybe years, they've had a complete caricature in their head. The quiet one was just a non-entity, a background character with no depth, no complexity, no inner life worth considering. But now that they're actually paying attention, they're seeing things they never noticed before. The way the quiet one's eyes track conversations with this intense focus. The way they seem to understand references and subtext that nobody explicitly explained. The way they react, or more accurately, the way they choose not to react to things that would make other people respond immediately. It's like looking at one of those optical illusions where once you see the hidden image, you can't unsee it. The powerful one is realizing that the person they dismissed as simple is actually operating on a completely different level of awareness. And that realization is deeply, profoundly unsettling. Because if they were this wrong about this one person, what else have they been wrong about? What other assumptions have they built their entire worldview on that might be equally flawed? But here's where it gets really complicated. And this is the part that keeps me up at night thinking about human nature. The powerful one's response to this discomfort isn't to become more humble or self-reflective, at least not at first. Their initial response is to try to reassert control in more subtle ways. They start testing the quiet observer, asking questions designed to catch them off guard, creating situations where they'd be forced to reveal their hand, basically trying to map out exactly what this person knows and what they're capable of. And the quiet observer? They see this happening. They understand the game that's being played, but they're in this impossible position now because every move they make gives away information. If they answer too smartly, they reveal they've been paying more attention than anyone realized. If they answer too simply, they confirm the old assumptions and lose the tiny bit of ground they've gained. If they stay silent, they seem evasive, which creates its own kind of suspicion. So they choose a different strategy. They start answering questions with questions, not in an obvious or confrontational way, but in this subtle Socratic method that makes the powerful one explain their own assumptions. And this is brilliant, right? Because it forces the powerful one to articulate things they've never had to articulate before. It makes them defend positions they thought were self-evident. And in doing that, in having to actually explain their logic out loud, they start hearing how it sounds. They start noticing the gaps in their own reasoning. There's this concept in psychology called the Socratic effect, where the act of explaining your beliefs to someone else often reveals inconsistencies you weren't aware of. The quiet observer is weaponizing this. Not aggressively, not obviously, but consistently. Each question they ask is carefully calibrated to create just a little bit more self-doubt in the powerful one's mind. And the powerful one feels this happening, but can't quite articulate why these conversations leave them feeling off balance. They walk away from these exchanges, technically having maintained their authority, but somehow feeling less certain about everything than they did before. It's like fighting someone who never throws a punch, but somehow you end up exhausted anyway. Agora eu quero ir ainda mais profundo nesse assunto because what we're witnessing is actually a masterclass in psychological warfare. Except, nobody's calling it that. There's no violence, no threats, no explicit confrontation. Just two people engaging in what looks like normal conversation, while underneath they're both playing for incredibly high stakes. The other people in this space are starting to notice something's different too, even if they can't pinpoint what. There's this tension in the air that wasn't there before. The usual rhythms feel disrupted. The powerful one isn't as smooth as they used to be. They're more reactive, more defensive, more likely to over-explain things that never needed explanation before. And the quiet observer? They're still quiet, still mostly invisible, but there's something different about their presence now, like they're taking up more space without actually moving. This is when things start getting dangerous, and I mean really dangerous, because systems, whether they're social systems or political systems or any kind of hierarchical structure, they don't like uncertainty. They function on predictability, on everyone knowing their role and staying in it. When someone starts operating outside their assigned role, when the rules start feeling negotiable instead of fixed, that's when systems start trying to protect themselves. And the way systems protect themselves through people is fascinating and terrifying. The powerful one starts doing something they haven't done before. They start talking about the quiet observer to other people, not openly criticizing them because that would be too obvious, but asking leading questions, expressing concern, planting seeds of doubt about this person's intentions or reliability or character. It's reputation management disguised as concern, and it's incredibly effective because it activates other people's biases and assumptions. Suddenly, other people in the space are looking at the quiet observer differently, not because the observer has done anything different, but because they're being viewed through a new lens. The lens of potential threat, the lens of disruption. And once people start looking for problems, they find them everywhere. Behaviors that were previously ignored or considered neutral suddenly get reinterpreted as suspicious or problematic. This is the real test. This is where most people who challenge power structures break, because it's one thing to deal with direct opposition from the powerful person. That's almost easier because it's clear and honest. But this social isolation, this subtle character assassination, this mobilization of the entire group against you without anyone explicitly saying they're against you, that's psychological warfare at its most brutal. The quiet observer is watching this happen in real time, watching the powerful one turn their own invisibility into a weapon against them. Because here's the sick irony. All that time spent being overlooked, being treated as insignificant, being invisible, that history is now being used to paint them as someone who can't be trusted precisely because they were always so quiet. What were they thinking all that time? What were they planning? Why didn't they speak up before if they had such strong opinions? It's a no-win scenario. Stay quiet and you're suspicious. Speak up and you're disruptive. Defend yourself and you're defensive. Don't defend yourself and your silence is taken as admission of guilt. The system is designed to make the challenger lose no matter what they do. But here's what the powerful one doesn't realize, what they can't realize because they've never been in this position. The quiet observer has been training for this their entire life. Every day of being overlooked was preparation. Every moment of being underestimated was education. They learned how to survive in hostile environments. They learned how to maintain their sense of self when nobody reflected it back to them. They learned how to find truth in situations where everyone around them was participating in collective fiction. So while the powerful one is trying to use social pressure to force compliance, the quiet observer is doing something unexpected. They're getting calmer, more centered, more clear about what's actually happening, because they've seen this pattern before. They understand that this escalation is actually a sign of weakness, not strength. Strong, secure power doesn't need to mobilize groups against individuals. It doesn't need to assassinate characters or plant doubts. The fact that the powerful one is doing these things means they're scared, means they recognize that their authority is more fragile than anyone thought. And this is where the quiet observer makes a decision that changes everything. They decide to stop playing defense. They're not going to try to convince everyone that they're trustworthy or harmless, or any of the other things people want them to be. Instead, they're going to do something that requires incredible courage and incredible clarity. They're going to trust that the truth has its own power, that if they just keep showing up authentically, keep asking honest questions, keep reflecting back reality without distortion, eventually people will have to choose between the comfortable lie and the uncomfortable truth. This decision fundamentally shifts the dynamic because it means the quiet observer is no longer trying to manage anyone's perception of them. They're not performing anymore. They're not strategic in the way they were before. They're just present, honest, clear. And that authenticity is like a mirror that makes everyone else's performance more obvious by contrast. The powerful one feels this shift immediately, and it terrifies them because they don't know how to fight authenticity with performance. They don't know how to compete with someone who stopped competing. All their usual tactics, intimidation, social pressure, reputation management, they work on people who care about maintaining their position within the system. But what do you do with someone who stopped caring about the system's validation? This is the moment when external forces start to notice what's happening. Not because anything dramatic has occurred, but because tension that high can't stay contained forever. Other authorities, other observers, people who exist outside this immediate dynamic, they start picking up on the fact that something's going down. The space that used to feel stable now feels volatile. The power structure that seemed permanent now feels temporary. And the most dangerous part? Nobody knows what's going to happen next. Not the powerful one who's realizing all their moves are being anticipated. Not the quiet observer who's committed to authenticity without knowing where it leads. Not the bystanders who are starting to realize they might have to choose sides when they'd much rather stay neutral. Escreve aí. Isso me dá arrepios. Porque eu sei que vocês estão sentindo a mesma energia que eu. Tipo quando você sabe que algo grande está prestes a acontecer, mas ainda não sabe o quê. So here's what actually happens when everything finally comes to a head. And I need you to understand that this isn't Hollywood. There's no dramatic music, no slow motion moment, no perfectly scripted confrontation. What happens is somehow both smaller and bigger than that. It starts with something mundane. A regular day, a regular situation, the kind of moment that's happened 1,000 times before in this space. The powerful one is holding court, doing their thing, completely in their element. Everyone's playing their roles. The machinery is humming. And then the quiet observer does something that shouldn't matter but somehow does. They speak. Not loudly. Not aggressively. Just a simple statement. A single observation delivered in that same calm, measured tone they've always had. But the content of what they say, that's what detonates everything. Because what they articulate is something everyone in that space has felt, but nobody has named. A truth that's been sitting in plain sight, invisible, because acknowledging it would require everyone to admit they've been participating in something unhealthy. The quiet observer doesn't accuse anyone, doesn't point fingers, doesn't even raise their voice. They just state a fact about the dynamic, about the pattern, about the way power has been operating in this space. And the way they say it makes it impossible to dismiss as opinion or interpretation. It's presented with such clarity, such matter-of-fact certainty, that everyone in the room immediately recognizes it as true. And the powerful one? They freeze. Because in that moment, they have to make an impossible choice. They can deny what was just said, but everyone heard it and everyone knows it's accurate, so denial would make them look dishonest or delusional. They can get angry, but that would confirm they feel threatened, which undermines the whole image of secure authority they've been projecting. They can laugh it off, but that would seem dismissive and cruel in a way that would turn everyone against them. They can agree with it, but that would mean admitting they've been aware of the problem all along and chose to do nothing about it. There is no good option. Every possible response makes them lose something important. And the quiet observer knew this. That's why they waited. That's why they spent all that time just watching and learning and understanding. They were looking for the exact right moment to present the exact right truth in the exact right way so that there would be no escape route, no way to spin it, no way to maintain the old narrative. The silence that follows is crushing. It's maybe 5 seconds, but it feels like an hour. Everyone in the space is holding their breath because they understand they're witnessing something fundamental shift. The emperor doesn't have clothes, and someone finally said it out loud, and now everyone has to decide what to do with that information. And here's where it gets really human and really messy. Because the powerful one doesn't collapse, they don't apologize. They don't have some dramatic realization where they see the error of their ways and transform into a better person. That's not how people work, especially people who've built their entire identity around being in control. Instead, they do something much more real and much more complicated. They look away. That's it. That's the whole moment. They look away from the quiet observer, and in doing so, they concede. Not explicitly, not verbally, but everyone feels it. The shift in energy is palpable. The powerful one just admitted through body language what they couldn't admit with words. They know. They've always known. And they chose their comfort over everyone else's dignity. But the story doesn't end with this moment of truth, because here's the thing about exposing toxic dynamics in real time. The system doesn't just fold because one person spoke up. The hierarchy doesn't dissolve because someone pointed out it was unjust. What happens instead is more complex and more realistic, and honestly more painful. Some people in the space recognize what just happened and feel this mix of relief and shame. Relief because finally someone said it, but shame because they didn't. They watched it happening too. They participated in the collective silence. They benefited from not rocking the boat, and now they have to sit with the reality that their comfort came at a cost they chose not to see. Other people get defensive. They don't want to admit they were complicit in anything unhealthy, so they start revising history in real time. They convince themselves the dynamic wasn't that bad, that everyone's being too sensitive, that the quiet observer is making a big deal out of nothing. They find ways to blame the messenger because that's easier than examining their own participation in the problem. And the powerful one? They start the process of what I call strategic retreat. They don't overtly change their behavior in ways that would constitute admitting fault, but they subtly adjust. They become more careful about what they say and how they say it. They perform humility without actually being humble. They make token gestures toward equity while maintaining the core power structure. It's reformation without real transformation, and it's incredibly frustrating to watch because it's just sophisticated enough that most people accept it as progress. The quiet observer sees all of this and has to grapple with a difficult truth. Speaking up didn't fix everything. It didn't even fix most things. What it did was make the invisible visible, but visibility doesn't automatically equal change. The patterns are still there. The power imbalances are still there. The only difference is now everyone knows that everyone knows, and there's no going back to the comfortable fiction they were all living in before. Agora eu quero ir ainda mais profundo nesse assunto because this is where the real transformation happens, and it's not where most people think it does. The transformation isn't in the powerful one suddenly becoming enlightened. It's not in the system magically fixing itself. The transformation is in the quiet observer's relationship to their own voice and their own reality. Because here's what changed. They proved to themselves that they could speak their truth and survive it. That their perception of reality was valid even when nobody was validating it. That silence was a choice they had been making, not a condition that was imposed on them. And once you realize you have agency, once you understand that your voice has power, even in spaces that try to strip you of power, you can never go back to believing you're powerless. This doesn't mean everything gets easier. In fact, some things get harder. The quiet observer is no longer invisible, which means they're no longer protected by obscurity. They've made themselves a target. They've disrupted a system that benefits from staying undisrupted. There will be consequences for that. Social consequences, professional consequences, emotional consequences. The powerful one and their allies will make sure of that, even if they do it subtly enough to maintain plausible deniability. But the observer also discovers something unexpected. They're not alone. The act of speaking truth, even uncomfortable truth, creates permission for other people to speak their truth too. Other invisible people in that space, people who had been silently observing just like them, they start finding their voices. Not all at once, not dramatically, but in small ways, in private conversations, in subtle acts of resistance to the old order. A network of formerly invisible people becomes visible to each other, and that creates a different kind of power. The powerful one feels this too. They realize that what they thought was an isolated incident with one problematic individual is actually part of a larger shift. The people they dismissed as powerless are discovering they're not. The compliance they took for granted is starting to feel more conditional. The authority they assumed was inherent is revealed to be granted, which means it can be withdrawn. This creates a fascinating standoff where technically nothing has changed, but fundamentally everything has. The same people occupy the same positions in the same structure, but the meaning of those positions has shifted. The powerful one still has formal authority, but they've lost something more important: the unconscious compliance that comes from people genuinely believing in the legitimacy of the hierarchy. Now everyone's performing their roles while simultaneously being aware that they're performing. The spell is broken even though the structure remains. And the quiet observer? They're dealing with the complicated aftermath of becoming visible. They're getting attention they never wanted. Some of it is positive. People thanking them for speaking up, sharing their own stories, expressing solidarity. But some of it is negative. People blaming them for making things awkward, accusing them of having ulterior motives, treating them as a problem that needs to be managed. They went from being ignored to being hypervisible, and neither state is comfortable. This is the part of transformation stories nobody talks about. We love the moment of triumph, the moment when the underdog wins and justice prevails. But we skip over what happens after that moment, the messy reality of living with the consequences of your courage. The way speaking up makes you permanently different in spaces that reward sameness. The exhausting work of maintaining your truth when systems are designed to make you doubt it. The quiet observer is learning that there's no neat resolution to any of this. They can't go back to being invisible even if they wanted to, but being visible doesn't automatically make things better. They've traded one set of problems for a different set of problems. The old problems were about being unseen. The new problems are about being seen too much, seen incorrectly, seen as a symbol or a threat or a lesson, rather than as a complete human being. And yet, despite all the complications and consequences and lack of clear victory, something essential has shifted. The quiet observer knows something now that they didn't know before. Their reality is valid. Their perception is accurate. Their voice matters. Not because anyone gave them permission to matter, but because they decided they matter regardless of permission. That's the real transformation. Not changing the system, not fixing the powerful one, not even changing how other people see them. The transformation is internal. It's the recognition that you've always had the capacity to stand in your truth, you just didn't know you had it. And once you know, you can't unknow it. Deixa nos comentários. Eu entendi a lição. Porque se você chegou até aqui, você já sabe que essa história nunca foi só sobre esse momento específico. Look, if you made it all the way through this, that says something about you. You're not just scrolling for entertainment. You're actually thinking about this stuff. You're connecting dots between this story and your own life, your own experiences with power, silence, invisibility. And that matters. So here's what I'm going to ask. If this resonated with you, if something in this story felt familiar or true or just made you see things differently, hit that subscribe button. Because this is what we do here. We dig into the human dynamics that nobody else wants to talk about. The uncomfortable truths, the invisible patterns, the moments that change everything while looking like nothing. And if you're someone who thinks about this kind of stuff, who wants to understand people and power and transformation on a deeper level, then you belong here. Drop a comment saying, "Essa historia é minha também," so I know you stuck around till the end. I read every single one, and it genuinely helps me understand what's connecting with you, what stories need to be told next. And yeah, throw a like on this if it hit different. Not because I need the validation, but because it tells the algorithm that content like this, content that actually makes you think instead of just numbing you out, that's what people want to see more of. There's another video right here that goes even deeper into what happens after someone finds their voice. How you navigate spaces that don't want you to have power. How you maintain your truth when everyone's trying to make you doubt it. Click on that and keep this conversation going with me over there. I'll see you in the next one.